Good to see everybody in person. I think it's our first CDP launch, report launch in person in about 3 years or so, I think. Yeah. I think we were in the new AIB headquarters. I don't know if there's anyone here from AIB. I think this tops it. A little bit. What a venue. What a venue. My name is Brian O'Kennedy, for those of you who don't know me. I'm the Managing Director of Clearstream Solutions, and we're the admin behind the CDP Ireland Network here, so I'm going to be your moderator this morning. On a morning like this morning, when we look out at this beautiful view on the terrace, I'm not sure what time cocktails are being served at, but I think certainly I'm conscious of how fortunate we are to live on such a beautiful planet in such a beautiful city, and I suppose without lecturing, but the risks and the damage that potentially we have done and can do to this environment. I think as we look out the window today, there's nothing more obvious and reminds us of our responsibility. So just to mention that. In the context of the journey that we've been on, we were just looking through the slides this morning of the presentation. I realised that I think this is report number 8, which is fantastic. And it's an easy thing to do, to generate a CDP report every year. It takes a huge amount of effort and work. So for those of you who have contributed, for those of you who support, and particularly I'll come back to the thanks. The report is available online on the CDP Ireland Network website. We print a very, very limited number of copies for the committee, but you can download the report online. I think back to another report I saw about 2 years ago when I saw the Ryanair sustainability report, and well done to Ryanair if they're here. It's great to see Ryanair with their sustainability report. But 12 years ago, Michael O'Leary told me that it was the gobbledygook peddled by the climate change loonies. So we've all gone through a big change, and it's great to see the change. And people say to me, well, will we see more change? And I said, well, look back 3 or 4 years ago and look at the change that we've seen. So we're going to talk a little bit about whether we're hopeful, glass half full, or we're a little down on the last 12 months because we have a lot of challenges. So that's enough by way of the introduction. I was going to go through the agenda today. We've got a very packed agenda as usual. So we will be welcomed by our hostess, I guess, from NTMA. Emma Jane has been, I think, probably the first recruit onto the CDP Network Ireland committee, and she hasn't been able to escape since, but thank you for hosting today. I'm also conscious of the effort and work that NTMA is doing in encouraging us all, both in terms of what it does on the ground itself. I've never seen such an array of EVs in a car park before, so walking the talk, but also in terms of the work that NTMA is doing. One of our clients said they recently met with the NTMA and they were asking about performance financially, but the second thing they asked about was environmental sustainability and ESG, so it's great to hear. I'm going to have an introduction from Emma Jane. Then we'll have opening remarks from our chair, Owen Fahy. So I'll wait to say a few words on Owen before that, but Owen has been hugely passionate and supportive and is our outgoing chair, and we'll be handing over to Kathy officially at this meeting. We're delighted. Unfortunately, Maxfield wasn't able to make it, but he did send us a video. But his colleague Nicole is here, and Nicole, for those of you who have sought support from CDP headquarters, has been a fantastic addition. So we're delighted to have Nicole. So Nicole is going to give us a few words on the direction that CDP is going in, and some watch outs coming down the track. And then my colleague Groiny McIver is going to take us through the actual details in the report. There's a lot of data, statistics and numbers behind this, so publishing that in a meaningful way each year is a challenge to give you the key shout out. So Groiny is going to take us through some of the highlights of the report. And then the fun piece is the panel, and we have an expert panel for you today, all of whom who have contributed to the report. Somebody told me during the year, I can't remember who it was, I should have taken their name, that it was the best the CDP report last year was the best report they saw on climate change and corporate climate change during the year, so please read it. But all of the contributors, the panelists have made a contribution to the report, from Kathy from the investor perspective, Annabelle from Energia, who gave us a first-time responder perspective, Neil Dover from HP, a triple A lister, so an A list for climate, forests and water, which is extraordinary. And Neil Menzies, who is one of our proud A category listers in Ireland. So great expert panel. So hopefully we'll have some fun with that. And finally, some closing remarks. Hope to get you out by 12 o'clock, back onto the balcony. So just very briefly, the CDP Ireland Network, it's an open network. It's really about knowledge share, experience share. It's like a self-help group for people doing CDP responses. So the idea was that, again, there's no membership fee. It's really about collaboration and openness. So join the LinkedIn groups. Just to keep participating at our events. Kathy has made it very clear that she wants to have as many people participating as possible. So we're going to be really focusing on outreach and events and knowledge shares in the coming year. So again, we don't lobby per se, but again, we want to be a strong voice for those who work in business and who really want to make a difference. And as I said, very collaborative. So if you're working on initiatives or projects, the committee would be happy to come and engage with you on what CDP is doing and how it serves. And the number one thing that we get told about the CDP program is that it's just a really good framework, solid framework to understand what best practice in corporate climate change is. And many of us have learned how to navigate through corporate climate change using the CDP program. Our committee, I'm going to thank the committee now, just lest I forget afterwards, but again, this is voluntary. As Emma Jane can attest for you, said it's a bit like the Hotel California. You can never leave. But no, we're delighted. We have a very active committee. We have 4 meetings a year, and I thank them not just for their commitment during that period, but also for their engagement and involvement. I particularly want to thank Owen as outgoing chair. I don't know if most of you probably know Owen, but he is about the plainest speaking person in climate change that I've ever come across. You will get it straight, very clearly, the impact of not doing what investors want you to do in terms of climate change. He's been a tremendous support for us, and as a committee, took the job on for 2 years. We're hoping he won't leave completely. We'll keep a piece of him. But I'd like, on your behalf and on behalf of everybody engaged in climate change in Ireland, to thank Owen. And he's involved in lots of other committees and stuff like that. So maybe a round of applause for him. Just briefly, the sponsors. So SEAI and EPA have been a consistent supporter. And in fund, as I said, we don't have membership, so they basically help us to fund the organisation during the year. We have report sponsors, so we have KPMG Futures and ILIM, who supported the report publishing this year. So thanks to the sponsors for that. So that's the initial welcome. So I'm going to hand over to Emma Jane for a few words on NTMA.
Thanks, Brian. Sorry, I know we have a packed agenda this morning, so I'll only take literally a minute or two of your time. Good morning, everyone. I'm Emma Jane Joyce. I lead the Sustainability and Climate Action Unit in the NTMA. You're obviously a lot taller than me. Can you hear me?
It's like a singing mic. You've got to hear right close.
Just thanks so much for joining us this morning. And thank you to the Sun for coming out, and to Donal, and to my colleague Amy Dowling, who have done great work just in setting up for this morning. I'm reminded that I think it was 3 years ago, really just before COVID was taking hold, we were due to host a CDP, one of the many quarterly meetings we've had over many years here in the building. We just newly occupied it at the time, but it was, I suppose, fear was setting in, and we decided to, in a world before Zoom and before Teams, to move to a conference call. And so it's lovely. It's taken almost 3 years, but delighted not just to join it, to welcome everybody, but also the committee members to this morning to Treasury Dock. As Brian mentioned, NTMA has been a long-time supporter of CDP. On a personal basis, it was the first responsible investment initiative that I ever got involved in, and back then it was through the National Pensions Reserve Fund, which was the predecessor to ISIF, and it was the simplicity at the time of an investor just asking for environmental information in a standardised form, and to contribute to that. And when you think back, it's maybe 15 years ago. And since then, I suppose ISIF, or the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund, has continued that tradition. It's been an annual signatory to the request for information that goes out from CDP every year. And then last year, in the newly established Sustainability and Climate Action Unit, after years as an investor of asking corporates to, contribute this information under CDP, for the first time, myself and Amy, my colleague, were tasked with actually doing it ourselves. So for NTMA, so we felt the pain. We we're sitting on the other side of that request, for the first time last year. And I suppose, why do we do that? We're a statutory entity. We're a public body. We're not a corporate. But we are very much an organisation that is committed to climate action and to sustainable finance, both in terms of what we do. In other words, the delivery of our mandates on behalf of government, and also how we do it. In terms of integrating sustainability into our business processes. Throughout the organisation. So that's really what we've been focused on, and it certainly kept us honest going through that process for the first time. And really what it means is that we're holding ourselves to the same standards that we expect of the entities that we deal with, as Brian mentioned, particularly our ISIF investees. So, and not only that, but you mentioned this as well, Brian, it has certainly meant that it keeps us on our toes. It means that we are prepared for a world of increased disclosure standards, and it's a very useful and helpful process. So I won't take any more of your time. I'd just like to thank you all for coming, welcome you, and we'll back to Brian to get on with the morning. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emma-Jane. And now for some honest, straight-up opening remarks from Mr. Owen Fahey. Owen.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for your undeserved but very kind words. Thank you. So it is customary, I think, for the, at least in the days when we had these in person, for the chair to make some remarks about the previous year and to review the major events that had occurred over the previous year from an environmental sustainability point of view. And I decided not to do that this year for the very simple reason that there were so many other speakers covering that ground with far more of the likes of Maxwell and so on, with far more expertise and eloquence than I could summon. So I thought perhaps instead it might be useful to address the why or the so what of CDP. So a bit like Emma-Jane mentioned there for her organisation, our organisation too decided that after many years asking the companies in which we invest to report to CDP, that we better do it ourselves, so we weren't quite as hypocritical as we had been. So we too have been through the pain, and it is a pain, frankly, I mean, we all know that, of submitting data to CDP. So I wanted to focus a bit on the benefit of it, or where that data all goes, and what happens to it, and who uses it, and is it actually achieving anything. And, spoiler alert, yes, it achieves a lot, and it is very important, but let me go through that. My remarks are mostly going to be focused on, from the point of view of submitting data to CDP. So I wanted to focus a bit on the benefit of it, or where that data all goes, and what happens to it, and who uses it, and is it actually achieving anything. And, spoiler alert, yes, it achieves a lot, and it is very important, but let me go through that. My remarks are mostly going to be focused on, from the point of view of investors, because that's obviously the world I come from, representing an investment management firm. I'm conscious that not all signatories to CDP, of course, are private sector companies or listed companies indeed, but I think the remarks I'll make about investors and how important CDP data is to them could also be applied generally to many stakeholders in different ways perhaps, but I think stakeholders of all types of organisations, whether public sector, private sector, listed or unlisted, have similar views or similar sort of use cases and so on for the data. Different, but all equally important, I think. So I want to take you into the world of investment managers, which at the end of the day, I'm 3.5 decades working with in this business, working with portfolio managers. And every day, every working day of that period, I'm sitting in a room, I'm sitting across the desk, I'm talking to people, or listening to them talking more so, because I don't make investment decisions myself, that's not my role, but I listen to them talking about whether to invest in this company, how much to invest in that company, whether one company stacks up better from an investment point of view and an overall portfolio point of view than another. That's at its heart what investors do. They make investment decisions. And I can tell you as a fact, because I'm there, I'm in the room, I'm listening to it, that most definitely now, when my colleagues are talking about whether to invest in this company versus that company, or how much to invest in a particular company, they are absolutely au fait, and they absolutely discuss Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2 emissions, whether upstream Scope 3 emissions have been reported by this company, and if not, why not? What about downstream? They talk fluently and without any hesitation or pause about SBTI targets, whether a company has already got formal approval, whether they're on the road. They talk about alignment with Paris Agreement, they talk about emission reduction targets, they talk about deforestation, they talk about water. This is part of the normal conversation of portfolio managers in the investment world now. It most certainly wasn't 5 years ago. It probably wasn't even 3 years ago. And by way of example now, more than half the companies we invest in, more than half, either have an SBTI target already through the system and approved, or it's in process, as in it has been submitted to SBTI. I mean, that's extraordinary. And as recently as, I haven't checked the number to be honest, but I would think that if I went back even 3 years, maybe even 2 years, that number might have been very close to zero, and it's already got to more than 50%. So investors are absolutely looking at this type of environmental sustainability information, whether it's deforestation, climate, water use, consumption, all those factors are very much in the conversation of investors in the same way, neither more nor less important than the price-earnings ratio of a company, than its dividend, than the quality of its management, than its strategic plan, than its takeover plans, or whatever it might be. They are absolutely integrated into the investment process in our firm, but it isn't about our firm. Our firm is perhaps slightly greener on the spectrum than others, but all investment managers are moving in this direction. And you can see that in the level of interest, for example, that happens in training courses on this issue in our industry and so on. This is not some esoteric piece of data which you are putting together and submitting to CDP that then just sits in the cloud and no one pays much attention to. It most certainly is not a sort of woke project as some politicians in parts of the States would talk about, where, as you may know, those of you that follow it closely will know that there are actually states in the United States, particularly in the South, Republican-dominated states, that are passing legislation to make it illegal for investors to use this type of information in our investment process. I mean, it beggars belief, but it is actually happening. It is not wokeness, it is sound business commercial decisions. But not only that, but it has a tremendous importance, not just to the investment managers, not just to your companies or the companies we represent, but also to the planet. Figures differ enormously between different sources, but something of the order of a couple of $1 trillion per year needs to be found to be invested in climate change mitigation and adaptation, not in 30 years' time, but now. That can only come, the governments cannot possibly afford that. That has to come from the private sector. And investors will only devote the capital to these kind of technologies, to what is required to address climate change in particular, not to mention biodiversity and other challenges. They will only use that capital based on good quality hard data and information. The kind of information that you and we upload to CDP, knowing that it's a pain at times and it's onerous, and we could do, throw the pen across the room sometimes. Oh, for God's sake, how are we going to fill this in? I don't know what to put in here. That data is essential. That data is used, and that data forms a very important part in closing that climate finance gap between the capital that is available today to address these challenges and the far bigger number, which is the capital that needs to be available. So next time you're struggling, as we all do, I'm sure probably everybody here is involved in one way or another with preparing these submissions. Next time you struggle with a section, do bear in mind, and apologies for sounding a little bit preachy here, but do bear in mind that what you're doing in filling in that seemingly obscure question or field in the CDP, in the CCP submission, in its own way is every bit as important in its contribution to tackling climate change as driving an EV, as putting solar panels on your roof, as trying to fly less when it's not absolutely required. It is a really, really important step towards tackling change. And next time anyway, I'm tempted to throw my pen across the room at some obscure question that is driving me mad, I'll try to remember that, and I hope we all can. Before I conclude, I do want to say a couple of thank yous at the end of my term as chairman, if you'll indulge me, just for a moment. First and foremost, I'd very much like to thank the members of the committee, most of whom are here today. I think the fantastic thing, and this was sort of mentioned earlier by Brian as well, is it's approach, all the members of the committee approach it with a completely open spirit. It's cooperation, it's information sharing, it's knowledge sharing, and indeed some of our sessions are explicitly called knowledge sharing. It's fantastic to have a network where you can just go and you can raise an issue that has come up and say, has anyone come across this? What is anybody doing about this, that and the other? And it's that total spirit of openness rather than competition that has been so important to the committee, and I'm sure that will continue under Cathy's leadership. And I should also take the opportunity to thank you, Cathy Ryan, for those of you that don't know, Cathy, who's sitting here in front of me and who you'll be hearing from later on the panel session later, for taking on the role as chairman to succeed me, as I'm from, well, I suppose about an hour's time, isn't it, or something like that. And to thank you for taking that on. I mean, I know already, even long in advance of her taking over, that she is already bringing in an energy, a tremendous commitment, and indeed her special expertise built up over the years to the work of the CDP. And I know you already have plans to build further on what we've achieved. So I think that's fantastic. And thank you very much for taking that on. And best wishes as you move forward. I should also thank Brian and his colleagues in Clearstream who support the work from Clearstream, who support the work of the committee and who do so much of the organisation for us. We'd be lost without you and your colleagues, Brian. So thank you very much indeed for taking on that role. And I will leave it there and hope you enjoy the rest of the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. I told you, plain speak.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maxwell Weiss, and I'm the Executive Director for CDP. Now, I'm delighted to join the CDP Ireland Network today. Now, since our last report launch together, so much has happened and so much has changed. We're coming off the back end of both COP27 and COP15, and I was on the ground in Egypt, and I kept on hearing that this was supposed to be our implementation COP, when commitments finally turned into real progress on 1.5. But let's not kid ourselves. It did not. And once again, our global leaders failed us. They fell short. Yes, I have to admit there was amazing progress made on finance for vulnerable communities, which was amazing to see. But then, at the same time, we backslid on fossil fuels that would only create further vulnerability into our systems. We barely just kept 1.5 alive. And now, as a result of that, we're headed for a 7% rise in CO2 when we were supposed to cut emissions in half by the end of this decade. Now, on the other hand, coming out of COP15, it brought about an amazing new global nature deal. And this is a historic decision, particularly in the context of CDP, as it will make biodiversity reporting a norm. Now, 2022 was in many ways a watershed year, right? We're now going to see here in Europe a reckoning. Finally, we're going to have a strong environmental transparency law in place. And this is going to affect 50,000 firms and affect global companies through their European value chains. We're having new sustainability standards that are incoming, covering both nature as well as human rights. And we're going to ensure that companies need to report comprehensively on their environmental impacts. Also, we have new regulation in the form of the Corporate Sustainable Due Diligence Directive, and this is going to soon bite. It's going to require companies to have clear plans that transition their business models into a 1.5 degree footing. You see, accountability, it has never been so real as in this moment. And the 20,000 organizations using CDP, including the 116 here in Ireland, are well set up to be in line and ahead ahead of the game, especially on a legally binding net zero path since 2021. However, while regulation is a major milestone, we urgently need more action, including here in Ireland. Now, CDP analysis, it shows that just under 5% of European companies disclosing to us showed advanced progress to develop a credible climate transition plan. Now, every single company that impacts our environment needs to have clear plans to deliver. This is evident, and they need to be showing that they are doing so. And expectations, they are growing fast. They're growing fast for companies to include nature in their broader climate transition plans as well. Now, at CDP, we're going to continue to support and encourage Irish companies, cities, and financial institutions to keep up this momentum and continue to lead in the way that you always have done. The time for targets, this is over. Companies, financial institutions, and local governments need to now have credible plans to deliver. Plans for decarbonizing fast, plans for limiting warming to 1.5 degrees, and plans for moving us to an equitable, and I'm going to say this again, an equitable, nature-positive system for 2050. We must accelerate the rate of change. It's time. It is time to transform the norm. Thank you so much for listening, and many thanks to Clearstream and the CDP Ireland Network for welcoming me here today, and for the great impact you are having to bring Irish companies and financial systems in line with the net zero and nature positive future that we all need. I wish you a great afternoon and fruitful further discussions. Many thanks.
Some really excellent call-outs there from Maxfield. I just want to say before Nicole comes up that I'm really pleased that she came. She's not feeling 100%, so really delighted that you're here. Thank you, Nicole. It's your clicker, I think.
Perfect. And so, focus quite a bit.
All right. Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Brian, for having me here. As Brian mentioned, I'm not feeling very well, so please bear with me. I hope that I will manage to get through this in one go. But yeah, it's really great to be here. It's really great to be able to see everyone in person, not just per email. For those of you who might not know me yet, my name is Nicole Morejon. I'm working for CDP as an engagement manager, and I am managing the Southern European and the Irish market. And my role is basically to support companies throughout their disclosure, to answer any questions you may have. Please bear in mind I have around 170 companies under my remit now, so I might not answer immediately, but I'll answer eventually. Yes, and so today I want to give you a little bit of an update about what is coming up in CDP in 2023. A lot of it is echoing in Max's words. We know that 2022 was a great year. We had the approval of the CSRD. We reached to an agreement in the Global Biodiversity Framework at COP15. So great things came out of 2022. However, we also saw once again that the actions that we are taking are just simply not enough. It's no longer enough just to report through CDP, to report the impact, but or to set targets. Now it's the time to set robust and concise strategies and plans on how we are going to reach these targets. And that is also why CDP is going to have a bigger focus on transition planning. This year, last week, we actually had the CDP Europe Awards in Paris, where we also launched the Europe Report 2022 called Stepping Up. And among the findings, we saw that European companies are actually becoming quite aware of the necessity of having transition plans. So now we saw that around half of them, so 49% of companies, are actually reporting that they do already have a transition plan with 1.5 degrees alignment in place. However, we still see a lack of ambition and transparency in these plans. We've seen that under 5% of the companies that have reported to having these transition plans, under 5% have a 1.5 transition plan in place, and are transparency in the key indicators for these. Looking also at these key indicators, it shows that this progress is a patchwork progress, because even though 9 in 10 firms have initiatives to actually cut these emissions, only 26% of them are assessing their spending and their revenue and how it's aligning with 1.5C targets, and of those, fewer than 40% are actually building these climate concerns into their supplier contracts. Stakeholders, as Max mentioned, regulators, financial institutions, also are having growing expectations to how this change will be delivered. And not only are they expecting a more concise plan, but they're also expecting to include nature in their broader transition planning. Now, as the transition planning guidance is being developed at a pace, it's becoming a growing opportunity to actually include nature already in these transition plans, to bring solutions for climate change and nature loss together in transition planning. So yeah, it is basically seen that it is necessary for us to have a more holistic approach, especially with transition planning and incorporating nature, adaptation, and a just transition. In the topic of nature again, we can talk about biodiversity. So as you know, last year we included for the very first time biodiversity questions in the questionnaire. We had 6 questions that were focusing on the fundamental elements of responsible corporate behavior regarding biodiversity. And ahead of COP15 last year, we published these biodiversity reported data for the very first time. We saw that there is already quite a good will from companies for reporting on biodiversity. So 87% of those companies that were presented with the biodiversity questions did report on them, and 31% of these companies made a commitment or an endorsement that is biodiversity related. However, of this 31%, 55% of companies are failing in taking action towards these commitments, and we've seen that almost 70% of companies reporting on biodiversity do not take into account the impact of their value chain in biodiversity. So once again, we also see this trend going on how companies are not paying attention to their value chain, or not enough attention, not enough action and engagement is happening with their suppliers. One of the great developments from last year as well is that the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, so the TNFD, is actually developing a framework for disclosing on nature. And this framework will be final this year. And of course, there is no finalized information yet, but we encourage companies to take initiative to already take a look at the frameworks that are being developed, at the resources that are out there, and not to wait for perfect information. Because the demands and the expectations on this are also growing, so get ahead of it and start already preparing yourself by using these frameworks. So the framework that we've seen is called the SLEEP framework, where you first of all have to locate where your company is interfacing with biodiversity, evaluate the indicators, evaluate how this is affecting biodiversity, assess and manage your actions, and prepare for reporting. In parallel as well, the Science-Based Targets Network is developing a guidance for science-based targets for nature as well. And the first version of this guidance is going to be published in March already. SBTs, as you know, are measurable, actionable, and time-bound objectives based on the best available science, and that allows actors to align with Earth's limits and societal sustainability goals. Companies now are encouraged to use this first version that is already detailed in the methodologies to already assess and prioritize your impacts on nature, and then progress to setting targets on freshwater, land, and climate. as the SBTN will also simultaneously in March also launch their validation process. We will already have a small group of companies that will already gain some learnings from this validation process and the application that happened from January to February this year. So definitely keep watching this space, as science-based targets are also for nature now. I also wanted to touch a bit upon the changes that are coming into the questionnaires. I think this is one of the most important and interesting parts is, first of all, CDP is also piloting questions that ask companies for their activities that are in alignment with taxonomies, especially with the EU taxonomy. We have 4 new questions in the climate change questionnaire that will be in the C3 module, so this is the business strategy and financial planning module, and they will be focused on companies' spending and revenue aligned to their climate transition and aligned with the EU taxonomy. Of course, as these questions are only now being introduced, they will only be partially scored. I believe from the 4 of them, only 1 of them will be scored. But again, it is always good to stay ahead of it and already respond to them, so you know how what is coming in the next years. And additionally, CDP will also request companies to disclose data on plastics on the water security questionnaire. So this again goes back to our focus on nature. This will be a brand new module in the water security questionnaire that will basically be focused on production, use, disposal of plastics across the value chains. So if you are responding to the water questionnaire, this is coming. If you're not yet responding to the water security questionnaire and you've been requested, then please take a look, think about this. This is extremely important, and I think it's great that we've been able to develop these questions in this module that's been informed by the new plastics economy global commitment framework. And lastly, to go back to the EU taxonomy, we now have a team within the CDP basically to offer you that support, on how you can disclose through CDP with the EU taxonomy, how to best answer these questions, and how to deal with the impacts of the CSRD implementation that is coming in 2024. So of course, I'm gonna leave these slides. I hope these slides will also be shared afterwards. I'll leave the contact of my colleague Joshua Vickers that'd be happy to give you some capacity building for the EU taxonomy as well. So that is it from me. Again, if you have any questions, please always feel free to contact me. I might not answer immediately, but I'll answer soon enough.
Thank you, Nicole, and thanks for the reminder also. We didn't tell you, but we are actually recording the session on a video. We were afraid you'd all stay in your pajamas at home on such a lovely sunny day, so if you knew that it was. So there will be a recording of this which you can share with your colleagues, obviously, and we'll also share the slides and any other content from the day. So I know some of you were trying to take pictures and stuff like that, so it'll be all available after. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague Grania McIver. Many of you probably know Grania in the room because she's helping doing footprints and helping you with your reports and stuff. So Grania is going to take us through some of the highlights and numbers in this year's report. Grania.
Hello everyone. Yeah, so the CDP report every year gives good insight into the growth of the CDP program in the country, and also the actions and performance of the companies that are responding. So I'm going to go through some of the updated data for 2022 on this. So there is a strong interest in climate reporting in Ireland, which I know we say every year, but the data supports it every year. So we had a 58% increase in companies in Ireland responding to the climate change questionnaire in 2022, which is a massive jump up from last year's increase of 17%. So a part of this is that companies are obviously focusing on their climate strategy now the worst of COVID is over, but it is worth noting as well that CDP changed the system for supply chain respondents. That made it easier for them to respond to the climate change questionnaire as well. So there is a good number of companies here who might have been responding to the supply chain program for a number of years, who are now responding to the climate change program. But there is also a number of companies who are responding either newly this year because they realise it's either not optional for them or just because it makes business sense for them to do so. So we have 87 companies in Ireland who are responding to CDP. You probably recognise a lot of these names. Some of them are household names and are very important in Ireland's decarbonisation. One interesting thing to note is that only about half of these companies are actually requested by investors to respond to CDP. A lot of companies listed on here are self-selected companies and are voluntarily choosing to respond to CDP, which is great. And of the 57 companies that are requested to respond to CDP, 68% of those companies have actually responded this year, which is quite a good number. We had 2 companies who scored an A last year in Ireland, so Accenture and Train Technologies, which is a welcome comparison to last year when the scoring methodology changed and we had 0 A-listers last year, or 0 companies who scored an A last year. But we have 13 companies overall in Ireland who are in the A category, so either getting an A or an A-, and they're listed there alphabetically. But we do quite well scoring-wise in Ireland, so over 68% of the Irish companies who respond get a B- or higher, which is higher than the global average for CDP of 60%. It is a little bit behind the European average of 73% that score a B- or higher, but we are above the global average, which is great. And the next 2 graphs show this kind of graphically. So this is the global distribution of responders, and it shows 21% of the A category and 39% of the B category for global responders, compared to the Irish responders, which is 24% in the A category and 45% in the B category. So we're very happily skewed to the left in Ireland, which is good to see. And if we zoom out for a minute, there's 384 companies in Ireland overall who are reporting emissions on the island. So this includes the 87 companies that I've just spoken about, but it also includes multinationals who might have subsidiaries in Ireland who aren't based here, but have operations here. And it's increased since last year, so there's been a 25% increase in companies reporting emissions in Ireland compared to 2021. Which shows a growing number of multinationals in the country who have a focus on climate-related issues, and just goes to show that it is becoming more of a competitive issue for companies within Ireland as well. So science-based targets continues to be quite a hot topic. It is the gold standard for emission reduction targets. And for those who are looking to score better on CDP, it's one of the main actions that they'll look to get a verified target to increase their score. So we have 33 companies in Ireland who have an approved science-based target, and there's a further 33 companies who've committed to setting a science-based target, which is great to see. So the science-based targets continues to evolve. Over the last year, we've seen more sector-specific guidance come out. So the flag guidance there, forest, land use and agriculture is one of note. We've also seen a higher uptake of companies committing to net zero targets with the new guidance that's come out in the last 2 years for science-based targets as well. And we'll probably continue to see that trend go up. One other piece that's of note with the science-based targets is the emphasis that they have on Scope 3 emissions and their supplier engagement target that they have. Which really focuses on companies decarbonising their supply chain. And the CDP supply chain program is a great engagement tool for companies to leverage on this. So not only can they get more accurate emissions data directly from their suppliers, so they can get a more accurate or comprehensive baseline for their supplier emissions, but it also helps them to drive decarbonisation within their supply chain as well. So it continues to become increased popularity each year. So we've had 85 companies respond to the supply chain programme in Ireland in 2022, which is up 15 companies from the year before. And one interesting thing to say just about the supply chain questionnaire is that it's actually the same as the climate change questionnaire. So for companies who are responding to the supply chain programme, it is quite easy for them to respond to the climate change programme. And I know CDP have changed the system obviously in the last here to make it easier for them to do so. But if there is any companies who are interested in that, the CDP Ireland Network is here to help if you do want to make that switch. So up until this point, we've been talking about the CDP climate change programme, which is the most popular programme in Ireland, but CDP does have 3 programmes overall. So they also have a water security programme, which focuses on water management and your dependency on water and your risk around water as well. And they also have a forestry programme, which focuses on commodities where there's a higher risk of deforestation in their supply chain and what companies are doing to mitigate that risk. And of the 87 companies in Ireland that responded to the climate change questionnaire, we had 11 that responded to the water security questionnaire and 7 that responded to the forest questionnaire as well. And that number increases every year. These questionnaires have quite a lot of overlap in questions. If you look, say, at the governance section, there's quite a lot of overlap there, or would have noticed the biodiversity module that was put into the climate change questionnaire last year. There's some overlap there with the forestry and water security as well. And the travel direction for this is that eventually there may be one questionnaire overall that encompasses all of these. So that was a rundown of the 2022 numbers and update there. So hand back over to Brian for panel.
Thanks, Grania. Probably the most common question we get relates to the scoring, and obviously we're not involved in the scoring. In fact, CDP outsources the scoring to some scoring partners. The bar is continuously being raised, and for CDP to remain relevant in this global world of change, it will continue to have to build in new questions, new issues, and incorporate new reporting standards. And that's why the theme of this year has been, from a reporting perspective, is about the alignment of financial reporting and ESG reporting, which is going to change a lot of our worlds as we bring some of the financial rigor, auditing and assessments and validations and verifications to our ESG reporting. So I think it behooves us all to watch the direction CDP is going in, because it's obviously very closely aligned with some of the international standards work that's being developed both at an international level with ISSB and an SEC in the US, and obviously more locally here with EFRAG. So all of these standards are aligning. The bad news is that there's still a competitive issue, so there's always going to be somebody looking for something else and something different, but at least it will give us a structure. So even if you're not using these questionnaires, use them as a learning tool to understand the direction of travel on these topics and what's likely to be best practice coming down the line. With that said, I'm going to ask my panelists, my group of expert panelists, to come up and join us. And as usual, we always have, this is the piece where we get to talk to people who are actually in the weeds on the stuff. So we come out of the policy and into the practice. And we will hopefully have time. We were about 5 minutes late starting, so I'm going to steal 5 minutes at the other end for some questions for the floor if you want to capture your questions. So I'd like to invite up Annabelle. So I think I have, Annabelle Fitzgerald from Energia, Neil Menzies from Hibernia Real Estate Group, Neil Dover from HP, and Kathy Ryan from ILIM. I think that's it. I think we might have a roaming mic, but I think we can also remove that so that we have to. So I think that would be, actually we'll start here. No, we won't. Because I have one here.
I thought I was getting away with that one.
Here we go. Oh, let me get this one on. There we go. Neil has already been showing off that one of the audio kit apparently is HP. I'm sure the Sustainable Procurement Group here at NTMA are buying from companies that are producing sustainable products. So first question's an easy one. So really it's just around introducing yourself, your role in sustainability, and I suppose what CDP and sustainability means to your organisation. So I guess Annabelle, as our first time responder in CDP, I didn't see a horrific look on your face there with some of the new requirements going down the line. But so Annabelle, over to you.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Brian, and thanks for a lovely morning here this morning. So, my name is Annabelle Fitzgerald, and I am the ESG and Corporate Communications Manager with Energia Group. I'm a little over a year with the company, and I suppose we're a company that are really at the forefront of the energy transition here in Ireland and very much committed to that journey. As a first-time responder to CDP, I certainly did feel a little bit of pain, particularly back in July when we were about to press the big red button and submit our disclosure for the first time as an organisation. What I would say is no one person can do this on their own, and there was a tremendous amount of support from CDP Ireland, and indeed, Nicole, it's lovely to see you for the first time, but indeed answering many questions by email. And also the CDP website was a really great resource in terms of all of the guidance documents and webinars and videos that were available as a first-time responder. So CDP for us certainly was a milestone in our ESG journey in terms of our reporting frameworks that we're looking at and considering, and it will be certainly a key part of our annual reporting as we kind of look ahead with an eye on CSRD in the coming years. I suppose for us also it provides a benchmark for us as an organisation. We achieved a B-. We were really pleased with that. But that's very much a platform from which we're going to continue to develop and evolve, and really want to see our score increasing over the coming years. And also, I suppose, just to add, it's great to be able to see what other organisations are doing and learning from organisations and companies here in Ireland, across Europe and globally, and getting ideas on how we can best kind of continue our sustainability journey.
Thank you. Neil Menzies from Hibernia REG. Was it PLC?
Right, yeah. I won't mention this. Thanks, Brian. Good morning, everyone. So I'm not working for a household name. I think as Gordon mentioned earlier, I work for a company called Hibernia Real Estate Group, who many of you probably don't know. We own and develop commercial property in Dublin city centre. So we have a portfolio of over €1 billion of commercial offices. We do hold other asset classes as well, but it's predominantly in commercial office property in the city centre. So my role, I'm Director of Sustainability. I've been with the company for around 3 years now, and my role when I came in as the first sustainability role within the business was to ensure that we embed sustainability across the entire operations, from developing new properties to the operations of existing properties, to, I suppose, then the reporting side as well. So I get the full remit. I don't have a team. Until very recently I've hired somebody, so a lot of it is on myself, but the importance is that we embed it across the entire organisation. Everyone knows where they fit in when it comes to sustainability. So the journey had already begun before I did arrive, that we were being asked by investors. We were a PLC, so we were being asked by investors, like Owen mentioned, to, I suppose, understand our sustainability credentials, what we're doing in our buildings, where we're getting green building certifications. Then there became these industry benchmarks within real estate, which they asked us to respond to as well, which were very helpful, and set our strategy across sustainability. And then CDP came across the line. So in 2020, we were asked for the first time to respond to CDP. And there are lots, Brian, you talk about this quite a lot, there are a lot of different ESG benchmarks and reporting requirements, and you have to filter it out. You have to decide which ones are the credible ones that you want to respond to. So we felt that CDP was one of those credible ones. We were on a journey to set a net zero carbon strategy for the business, and we felt that CDP was going to help us on that journey as well. TCFD had also come across our table too, and we felt that, by having CDP as our kind of our benchmark, TCFD as the way we aligned our reporting structures, and then setting a net zero carbon target, it was a good approach across the board. So I suppose at this stage, we're 3 years in, we've moved up to an A- score, which is fantastic. We're delighted with that. It's a bit of a journey to get to the full A score, like those two at the top there. But I think we've got a really good framework in place, and we're very, very pleased with where we are at this stage. We're a very small company too.
Thank you, Neil. And so we separated the Neils, but we might actually go with the other Neil, Ella, next, just to keep it corporate first, and then we'll move on to the investors. And Neil Dover, so obviously an A- here, great score, and we've got a lot of Irish companies doing really well. HP AAA across all three categories. It's phenomenal, and I believe it's not the first year, it's the second or third year. So just lovely to get your perspective on sustainability at HP in terms of your role and also then how CDP fits into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So delighted to obviously have the AAA rating, and it's something that we really value in HP. It's we make a massive deal about it right from the CEO down across all the countries that we're in, over 40 countries. And I suppose when we look at our strategy is the sort of key shout out is that we want to be the most sustainable and just technology firm in the world by 2030. And CDP is a key pillar in that. So as we look at our sustainable strategy, it's across climate, community, and digital equity. And as we look at the climate piece, the three pillars that CDP have highlighted there already form an absolutely strategic part of that climate strategy and how we're going to address the climate element of our sustainability plan. As we think of our role in Ireland, I'm sort of conscious that I'm the only one without sustainability in my title, which Brian kept saying experts, and I kept looking around going, it's definitely not me. So, but you know, we've it's similar to what Neil has said, that we seek to instill across every aspect of the organisation a responsibility for sustainability, whether that's in R&D for our products, whether that's in sales, whether that's in delivery and operations. You know, every single individual needs to know and be on board with this plan, because if there's a small team, and look, we have a team across the HP organisation that would run all the data and run the reports, and we publish our sustainability report every year. But if it's just the responsibility of those people, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to get traction. It's not going to make a real difference in impacting the society and in the local community. And so for every single individual, we actually do sort of not only just training for people, but we run competitions to see who can deliver the message the best. We sort of, each organisation within the business is responsible for making sure everybody knows what the plan is and how that's going to impact their area within the business. And so for us, that's one of the reasons why CDP is so key, because it's a really clear benchmark and metric as to where we are against other firms, but it's also really clear to explain within our own organisation where HP is, what we've achieved, and where we need to get to in the future.
Excellent, thank you, Neil. And we'll come back to some of that stakeholder engagement piece after. Kathy, we had some interesting input from Owen on the investor side. Obviously, you're an investor signatory. Maybe tell us a little bit about what sustainability and climate means to you and your business, and then CDP as well.
Great, thanks Brian. Yeah, so Kathy Ryan, I'm Head of Responsible Investment at Irish Life Investment Managers, and we've approximately 92 billion invested across equity, corporate bonds, property and alternative assets. So as Owen mentioned earlier, to a great extent, I lead a team of ESG specialists. I'm delighted to say I've been in Irish Life 3 years now, and they're here today, but we have a very strong team of 5 ESG specialists who are looking across these asset classes to understand what is the sustainable credentials of the underlying investee companies and holdings that we have. And what I would say is, since in the last couple of years, particularly since 2020, we set decarbonisation as a key priority topic for us within Irish Life. And in order to achieve that and to evidence, I suppose, clear targets and aims, we set about putting in clear disclosure regimes. So, for example, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, or TCFD report, which many of you are familiar with, we issued 2 years ago. But we did so on the basis using the CDP data as the engine, basically, behind this disclosure capacity. So for us, really, CDP, as it has been, I suppose, at the inception of climate risk disclosure globally, for us, really, it prompts clear understanding and clarity around, what is the climate risk of our portfolios, where are the hot spots, how do we transition this portfolio to a lower carbon portfolio. For us, we ourselves have made the net zero commitment. So that means for the portfolios that we manage, we wish to see that those portfolios transition in an orderly fashion to a low carbon economy. For us, being long-term systemic holders of global portfolios, the worst happening is that there is a disruptive transition to a low carbon economy. It's bad for business, it's bad for asset valuations, it's bad for our overall practice. So in order for us to see that this happens in a clear, orderly transition, we try and use all the levers we have at our disposal to do that. So that is, one, we look at how we construct portfolios. Do we overweight those companies which have better green credentials, which have clearly taken advantage of the opportunity set of this transition to a low carbon economy? How do we vote and how do we engage on those companies? For those companies that we see as laggards, are we voting against them? Are we clearly communicating our need and interest to see those companies improve their credentials? Lastly, I suppose, how we engage with industry and how we engage with frameworks. So, for example, being part of the CDP committee and Ireland Network has been key for us in, as Brian says, sharing best practice, understanding what companies are doing in terms of this journey and how they improve the journey. So for us, I suppose it's you know, CDP has been a huge support for that.
Thank you, Kathy. And obviously that financial market, let's call it the broader, not just the investments, this is feeding through banking institutions, investors, and our neighbours next door, the central bank, are very active in terms of encouraging disclosure and action from a whole range of financially regulated organisations, which is trickling down to everything that we do. So we might come back and touch on that. So second question, I guess, and I think Maxfield referred to some of these issues. I'm naturally a glass half full person and would have been quite positive about where we were going on climate change and our ability as a race to redress it. But I have to say, some of my positivity has been knocked in the last few months with some of the challenges. Obviously, what's happening, the oil companies, record profits, and some of them pulling out of their target commitments. We've seen some issues around greenwashing in the voluntary offset market. We've had the US, which Owen referenced. We've had some attacks from the government, frankly, in the US on ESG. We've had the war. We're still off our targets. So there's been a lot to be a bit down about, glass half empty maybe about, in terms of climate in the last year. On the other side, you know, we've seen the standards coming forward, so legislation will move us along in the right way. The biodiversity COP was positive. The significant investments in transition to renewables, and the significant number of companies making ambitious net zero and science-based targets. So on balance, there is hope, but I just wanted to get the perspective of the panel as to when you're looking at all of these issues and you're trying to get people on board and the management, so you know, everybody to say, you know, this is really important. Are you doing that with? Is it in a positive environment that people are motivated to do this, or is it we got thrown our hands in the air and kind of gone on? So maybe you give us your perspective on that. We might use that mic. So I can. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose, Brian, I probably think the glass is half full, so it's not fully empty and it's not fully full. So there's kind of positives and negatives, absolutely. I suppose from our perspective in Energia Group, if I can kind of maybe list out some of the activities that we are involved in a positive way to help with the energy transition and the progress maybe that we're making. So we have a significant investment programme in renewable energy, a €3 billion investment programme. And with that, we're building new wind farms. We're hoping to increase by threefold the renewable energy on the island of Ireland that we generate. We're developing 2 significant offshore projects that would have the capability of powering over 1 million homes and businesses across the island of Ireland. In addition to that, we've installed an electrolyser at our Long Mountain wind farm, which will produce green hydrogen, the first of its kind on the island as far as I'm aware. And up there as well, when we speak about biodiversity, we're also re-wetting the boglands there. We have a number of different biodiversity initiatives happening. Mina Dreen is our largest wind farm in the country, and there we're involved in a biodiversity research project which which is fantastic when we think about climate and biodiversity crisis hand in hand. We've also got a significant battery storage facility in Castlereagh, which will help kind of stabilise the grid at times of low wind. So there's a lot of really positives happening in our organisation at an organisational level, but there is obviously a lot to do as well. And I think Neil touched on it earlier about that, embedding and integrating ESG and sustainability right across the organisation in terms of all levels, and getting that buy-in and support from all of the various teams. And one very kind of simple, I suppose, in many ways, initiative that we did in the last year was a sustainability education and employee engagement module that we rolled out to all employees across the group. So we've about 1,100 employees working in different parts of the business. And people took part in a 4-week kind of challenge and competition on sustainability. It was linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, as we link a lot of our activities to those goals. And it really helped push awareness within the organisation. I kind of feel like the whole sustainability piece, it's on a journey that health and safety went on a number of decades ago. And, it's not any one person's responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility. And whilst we have many, many challenges, I don't think in all my years that I've ever seen so many companies involved, so many actors, whether it's in the media or other stakeholders, really engaged in this topic before. And I think it's that kind of stakeholder pressure that will really ultimately help us achieve our goals.
Okay, that's a help, thank you. More positive after that. Neil, help cheer me up on climate.
I think, maybe 2.5 years ago when we set our net zero carbon strategy for the business, I was probably a bit disheartened because we were at the very beginning of COVID, everyone was working from home. We had split our carbon emissions, I suppose, into 3 key areas. One was the operations of our buildings, and you can split that again into what we have control of, which is the landlord side, as managing our buildings. And then you can split the other half into our occupiers, and all our occupiers were at home. And that was great because they weren't using energy in the buildings, but when they came back, where are they going to be engaged in this? They had totally other ideas. They were trying to manage their staff wherever they were in the world, getting the IT solutions. There was no discussion on sustainability, let alone climate change, and our net zero carbon targets for our buildings. And then the last piece of the puzzle was the embodied carbon of buildings. So we have more of a control of that and what we decide to do on our developments. So I think from an occupier engagement piece, I was quite disheartened, and I felt, well, where are we going to get to on this? Because that was the area that everyone was saying was most challenging. It's a huge task. It's probably 50%. I've just actually submitted all our carbon emissions data for 2022 to our owner Brookfield for their SEC reporting this morning, and our occupier emissions are well over 50% of our overall scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. So, but come forward 2-3 years, the glass is overspilling now. Occupiers are asking left, right and centre for the emissions data for their spaces. They're coming back to the offices. They have taken a time. They've set their own sustainability targets. They're setting SBTIs. They are responding to CDP. We're actually responding to the supply chain side for a number of occupiers who've asked us to respond to the CDP supply chain questionnaire, which is great. So I'm constantly being almost a consultant to them. Sorry, Brian. In trying to figure out, what their emissions are, what their sustainability strategy should be, how they fill out their CDP questionnaires themselves. Roll on 2 or 3 years, I'm in a much more positive state of mind about how we're going to achieve this. And we had Ryan and his team in last year to do some occupier engagement on measuring their own footprints as well, which was a really, really interesting exercise. And that only helps to empower them to understand how the buildings contributed to their overall emissions as well. And I think that was a really good exercise, and we're trying to formalise and build on that now this year as well. So, I think anyone in the sustainability sector will realise, things are positive. It's a big challenge, but the questions are there. Owen realises investment side, it's just there. It's every role is a climate role, really, as I've heard being said numerous times. Yeah,
good. Like that. Every role is a climate role. Okay. Maybe go to Neil again. So Neil, are we feeling happy at HP?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're feeling very happy. So I suppose as we look at what we're doing, we're striving for net zero by 2025. within HP operations, and then in our total value chain, we're looking at 2040 for net zero. As we look at, it's not just, I suppose, what we can do ourselves, it's how we can influence others to do, and we're using our weight as HP to influence the total value chain to get to that position. But what we've recently launched in the last 2 years, when all these sort of challenges have come up, is a program even among our partners who would resell our product, and we sort of wondered how it would go. It was a program called Amplify Impact, and it was saying, take the HP message and then apply it to your business, and how can we help you as partners to develop your story around climate action. And we've had over 10,000 partners sign up to that across 40 countries. We've done over 100,000 training courses, and the response has been overwhelming. And so I suppose as we look internally, you can say, oh, we can just do our little bit, but actually each business touches so many other businesses. And how do we use our influence of whether it's sitting on a procurement desk, do I buy from someone who actually holds these values that we hold, or am I just there to tick a box? And again, it's back to what we were saying at the start, around everyone has to own this across the organisation and recognise that my part is important, and then it's not just about what I can do for my organisation, it's how can I leverage the ideals and the goals that my organisation is built to influence others to make a change. I think when we talk to customers, when we talk to our partners, the endorsement of this is overwhelming. And yes, sometimes the bigger picture can get you down a little bit, but I think everybody strives to do the right thing. And I suppose it's something that we really value in the CDP relationship, is that we're sitting in a room with people who have similar values as what we do. And that's a really good place to start a relationship, and to talk to each other, not just about how we can work together to achieve sustainability, but how we can work together in a wider picture. And that helps them bring other people into it as well, because if they see that this organisation is doing something to change Ireland, to change the world, to change this the environment, the crisis that we're in, well, they want to be a part of that too.
Thanks, Neil. I'm conscious I read recently that the SEC are considering removing the reporting of Scope 3 emissions in their reporting. The SEC, the Securities Exchange in the US. I hope they don't do that, because everything that you guys are talking about, this engagement, value chain, external outreach, employee engagement, that's all Scope 3. That is how we influence and move the dial. And obviously we can do so much within our own four walls. So I really hope that doesn't happen. I'll be really depressed if it does. Thank you, Neil. Kathy, are you feeling positive about the next year, 2, 10?
Definitely positive, but that might be just a personality thing. But in terms of the last year, it has definitely been challenging. So for us, for example, we're part of the Great West Life Group, a North American-based large life insurance company. And definitely the politicization of this whole agenda in the US was quite, I would say, certainly not concerning from my viewpoint. But it certainly through some constraints in terms of, I suppose, how a lot of investors, particularly in the US, were considering this. And I think it's interesting to hear the other panelists, because I think we're facing similar pressures, right? So we have, both from our own investors in the company, our clients and our employees, similar interest and strength in supporting this agenda. Clearly from investor flows, for example, we still see continued very strong flows into our sustainable fund range. We've moved from approximately, in 2019, we had about 15% of our assets under management in what we call Article 8 designated products or sustainable products. We now have almost 49%. And that's a really strong growth in 3 years, and that growth path continues. I think Morningstar recently predicted that the capital asset growth rate of this area was approximately 12.9%. So that area of investments is growing really quickly, and that will prompt an organisation like ours, Owens, other investors to continue on the journey. Similarly with employee engagement, it's very strong. But I would say also what we have to consider as asset managers, as risk managers, there really is strong political will and government support for this agenda. So as we saw in the US, Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, you know, the $378 billion that they're committing to contribute to green technologies, as well as the Net Zero Act from the European Commission, which is contributing $250 billion. These are strong impetus to those industry areas. We've also had strong predictions in terms of doubling the European Commission's exposure to solar-powered energy by 2030. And even in China, the recent 5-year plan has actually included a minimum build of 33% in terms of renewable energy output. So I think for us, we have to recognise that there's government will, there's investor support, there's employee engagement, that really the strength of the agenda is as strong as ever. And certainly for us, we think, you know, it's a fallacy to consider, you know, value degradation, you know, when you're considering a planet that is not livable. So it's a bit of a non-starter.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Nice and balanced looking into the future there. One more question, and then if we'd open it up to the floor. We were talking, a lot of the questions that we get from customers relate to how they should organise and structure. So that we can get a little bit more practical here. How they organise and structure around sustainability, ESG reporting, data management, the governance piece. It's the G piece of the ESG. Maybe can you give us an insight as to how Energia are organised and how you're managing and I guess dealing with the governance issues around sustainability?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've established an ESG steering committee across the group with senior level managers in various business areas that are fully supportive and bought in to the whole ESG agenda within the organisation. And our ESG governance or ESG steering committee is sponsored by our Chief Financial Officer. So that ensures that we have executive board and management board level oversight of all of our ESG activities and decisions that we make as an organisation. We also established an ESG data working group, which has been absolutely critical with all of the data that we're trying to pull together from all parts of the business under the environment and social pillars, you know, from our HR people, from our emissions and carbon teams, our energy efficiency teams, our customer teams. So there's an awful lot of data being fed into that working group. So that's the structure that we have in place. We're also evolving to have some additional working groups, one with a very strong focus on compliance with all of the different changes in regulation that are kind of coming our way. We obviously want to ensure that we don't fall behind in that regard. And then we're also looking at our communities. So we have a specific community working group. We do quite a lot in the communities in which we operate and serve. And it's really important that we can capture all of that data and information as well. We have a really strong CSR program, a strong volunteering program, and we sponsor and support lots of different activities and actions that are all related to the climate agenda as well. So that's another important pillar for us. So I suppose that's really our structure at the moment, always evolving and always looking to others for inspiration as well.
Brilliant. And the CFO at the table, that's an important aspect and a key trend that we've seen in terms of making sure that you have your CEO engaged, CFO engaged. Neil, you were a team of one, now there's two.
Yeah.
Governance. How are you managing governance data?
But at the same time, we're a totally different scale to most of these companies. Like I'm sure Neil will probably talk about, you know, multi-jurisdictional and teams all over the world, where I'm worried about 33 people in an office in Dublin, so I don't need to go on calls. I can go and knock on their desk and get the answers I need. Albeit we have buildings across Dublin, so I rely on teams within those buildings as well. And thankfully we manage a lot of those assets ourselves with our own teams on the ground. But look back though, I suppose we're a PLC, so we always had a very, very good governance structure in place. We had a board who met quarterly, who I reported to on a quarterly basis, and always had that buy-in from them when it came to setting strategy around sustainability, our net zero strategy, our sustainability statement of intent out to 2030, which looks at net zero carbon social impact and health and well-being of those in our buildings. So we had a very, very good structure in place. It still is in place. We were bought last year, so we're now, we don't have that same board structure, but we have a reporting structure into Brookfield, our owners as well, who also have a very, very strong emphasis on sustainability. They have a large transition fund globally looking at climate action, and they have an ESG forum across Europe with all of the private companies that they own too. So it's been a huge, huge benefit for us to be able to get access to all these other real estate companies across the UK and Europe and understand what they're doing as well. Like as Annabelle mentioned, we have a sustainability steering committee which meets quarterly, and that's where we get the buy-in to any kind of measures we want to implement on the ground. I sit at the senior level management team as well. Most of those are on the steering committee too, ESG steering committee, and as I said, it's a flat structure. It's very, very easy to kind of have decisions made tomorrow, the next day. There's very few decisions we have to really bring to the sustainability committee on a quarterly basis to get those decisions made. On top of that, I suppose every department has their own committee meeting as well, and sustainability is creeping in there as well in terms of performance of our assets, due diligence on new buildings that we're looking to acquire, and then the finance team, I suppose, as well, are looking at the reporting side along with me too. So every committee now has sustainability slides in there. They understand it. They can talk the talk, which is fantastic. I don't have to lead them on that. They just do it as part of the process. So it really works really, really well. Yeah.
Just one specific way. Obviously, you're reporting. Anybody who wants to do a bit of studying up in your climate nerd moments. Some of the stuff that Neil and Hibernia have published in terms of climate transition is really top class, excellent. But one question that's in the CDP questionnaire around remuneration of senior management, and maybe do a little survey rather than specifically ask anyone. But again, who maybe we'll do it just for the room. Who in the room are there remuneration benefits or bonuses based on climate targets? Does anyone work for a company that has? Okay, so there's two, three, four. Okay, that's not bad. That's better. When you consider, if I asked how many have actually set corporate targets, probably most of the hands would have gone up. So it'd be really interesting to watch that transition and how we get.
Just to know now it's part of everyone's targets in the whole company. Everyone has, and it might be slightly different. The full net zero targets, we start with the CEO and the CFO, and then everyone in the senior management team might have variations of that and how we commit to those targets, right down to accessing data in each building, collecting that on an annual basis so we can actually assess how we're trending towards meeting those targets. So that's built into everyone's objectives and the financial impacts on their bonuses every year as well. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Makes those targets real. Neil, again, I'm conscious, obviously, huge global organisations, there's lots of governance here. What does it mean from on the ground from the real work that you're doing? How do you organise for sustainability?
I suppose we do have a sustainability team within the HB organisation. They would be based in the States, but then they would have branches in each region. So we were broken down into 8 regions across the globe. And they would be responsible for whether it's collecting data, but also responding to the many questions that we get, and I'm sure everyone here gets. There's so many questions, and you think you've heard them all, and then you get an email in to say, "What are you doing on this?" And you go, "Okay, I have to find that one out." So, so there's a whole team, even just in Northwest region of which we form a part. But I suppose in terms of what we do locally in Ireland, it comes back to what we were saying about the responsibility being driven to each area of the business. And I was just thinking before we came in about, even as we look in our sort of mergers and acquisitions, we've just acquired a business called Choose Packaging, a tiny little business, but they're the only business or only folks that we can see that make a fully recyclable paper water bottle. You might think, HB, what are you doing? But it's back to, how can we innovate and change, as we put our products into the market, how do we leverage that with, our innovations in 3D? We're so conscious that, as a manufacturer of products, you know, we have to deliver things, we have to be able to drop a laptop onto someone's desk, and the whole surround of that, how is that, we have to think about just how is that, how does it come about, and are we being as efficient as possible, you know. So you know, even to those teams that you sort of think, well, surely that can't be, they can't have a sustainability responsibility, but they do. So every single individual has to be accountable, and you know, we sort of run competitions even within the various teams to see who can sort of pitch sustainability the best, because you know, if you understand it and you can not just articulate the message, but you can live it out in how you approach business. That's for us the biggest achievement, I think, that we've done within the organisation. Because I think if you're constantly getting told what to do by a sustainability team, it's not. It's, you know, it feels like you're in school the whole time.
Yeah. It's not their job anyway.
They're just there to guide and to help. Yeah. And I'm sort of conscious that you guys are the sustainability teams, and you know. But truly, if we can get each person to think about that as they do their day-to-day job, you know, one of the facts that we love to spout in HP is that every laptop, every desktop that we've produced since 2022 has had recycled material in it, ocean-bound plastics that we've repurposed and brought back, and so the R&D guys are responsible. That, you know, so everybody is bought into this. And so I sort of keep thinking, all right, we've got this sustainability thing, but that's not what it's about. It's about getting the whole organisation buying.
Okay, thank you, Neil. The circular economy has a big role to play there. Kathy, from a governance perspective, I guess financial sector is heavily governed anyway, but how do you organise for sustainability and ESG?
We have ESG and climate metrics in our standard enterprise risk management dashboard. So we treat it like standard financial data. So given, you know, as I say, you know, almost half our assets now are in these Article 8 sustainable funds, we need to capture not only what the sustainable metrics are that inform those decisions about how we overweight and underweight companies, how we vote and engage in them, but also what are the sustainable impact outcomes that we achieve? How do we report to clients on those? How do we evidence that those sustainable objectives that we have within the fund are achieved? And so that goes into our standard monthly reporting. As a result, as everybody else is saying, it is part of the standard DNA of the organisation. So it goes into our standard governance model also. We have monthly or quarterly oversight from the boards, both at an Irish Life Investment Management Board level. We have an executive sustainability committee that we've set up within our Irish Life group. I sit on the Sustainable Investment Council of the Great West Life Group, which is a quarterly meeting. And then, as we do with financial data, it is also reported in all our monthly internal meetings. We have a risk monthly meeting that also the ESG and climate data is reported through to our Responsible Investment Governance Committee meeting, so right through the organisation. And it is everybody's job. I'm delighted to say, maybe we should run a competition, but from fund managers, client reporting, distribution, everybody is fluent, I would say, almost, but we'll maybe do a competition, yeah.
Brilliant, thanks Kathy. That's one of those big transitional changes that we've seen from when this was the responsibility of a green team or an ESG team to where it became everybody's responsibility. I did warn you I was going to steal 5 minutes. Any questions from the floor? Yes, maybe your name and where you're from, please.
Yeah, I do. Owen from working Kathy's team in Irish Life. I was just wondering for Neil Menzies, just on the net zero path for buildings, how is the industry going to deal with, say, the embodied carbon, say, of steel and cement, just the carbon intensive nature of that? Is there an overall plan, or how do you see that panning out?
5 minutes, or do we have? It's a huge challenge, yeah, and it's not just confined to Ireland, it's a global. So some of you might have heard, like 39%, I think, is the figure that they're putting out there, is the contribution of the built environment to global emissions on an annual basis, and that's split down predominantly as the usage of those buildings, but I think maybe it might be wrong, 12-15% is down to the actual materials, like the raw materials that go into constructing new buildings. And yeah, you'll see that we see it all the time, and the pressure is on that is the best building the one that's already built? Is the least impactful building the one that's already built? And it is absolutely the topic of conversation across anyone in a built environment. We work heavily with the Irish Building Council, who are doing fantastic work trying to research into alternative materials. The concrete and steel lobbying industry is very, very big globally, obviously. They want to protect their industries, and they're looking at low carbon versions of their materials. Is it the answer? Maybe an interim yes, but I think long term we have to look at the use of timber. I don't know how that impacts the forestry questionnaire, but it's quite an interesting topic as well. So for us, yes, we've set embodied carbon targets. I think the realisation that's coming very quickly is that, and you see that in Irish planning as well, is that knocking and rebuilding buildings is becoming more challenging. But you have to look at the integrity of buildings in Ireland, what they're built from originally. Lots of corporates globally, as much as they have sustainability targets, still want very nice high ceilings like this. They don't want the low ceilings that were built here in the 60s and 70s, right up to into the 90s. There's lots of questions to answer, and that comes back to then the value of those buildings. But at the moment, the way people and corporates are looking at their buildings that they occupy, sustainability is up there, and they're starting to ask about embodied carbon as well. So I see it as a positive that we're going to be pushed from all angles to do this, but developers, our architects, our engineers are really struggling to come up with the solutions to see how they can get those embodied emissions down low enough. I think it's a really interesting debate, and we're all part of it. But it's a struggle. I take timber just as one topic in there. Like there's fire regulations that impact on that, and in Ireland we don't seem to be adopting building from timber above certain heights, whereas other countries are going full steam ahead, especially in France. The Nordic countries, they all see timber production for apartment living and commercial spaces as the way forward. So
we're going to do a knowledge shares, one of the things that Kathy's very keen on. We're going to do sectoral knowledge shares in the coming year, and one of not the first one is going to be, you'll be invited, is going to be on the construction sector. Just to put your mind at ease, one of the busiest areas for us at the moment is material companies looking to do EPDs in their cements, in their materials. So the trickle down is happening. They're having to measure. They know it's coming. So big changes. Any last question? Yes. Derva.
A question for Annabelle, Derva Leahy from Energia. You mentioned, Annabelle, about the education tool you rolled out across your staff. Were there any challenges in that? What did you feel like the uptake was like in terms of getting buy-in from your employees?
Time in terms of your input, so really appreciate that. If you want to just take your seats for the last minute, and don't run off because we do want to take a picture of you before you go. Just finally to say a few last thank yous again to Emma Jane and her team, Amy, for hosting and for managing this, for all of you, for the committee, for the sponsors, KPMG and ILIM. I need especially to thank the Clearstream team, and particularly Grania Mooney, who's sitting in front of me here busily tweeting, who's put up with my madness for the last few weeks and months as we prepared for this. So again, thank you, Owen. Kathy, looking forward to working with you for the coming year. I'm sure I've forgotten someone. As you said, we will be sharing the video. We will share the slides. As we said, we're going to have some knowledge shares coming up. We hope to see some of you responders and investors and practitioners coming along to share your expertise in this rapidly evolving but positive, a bit more positive after today. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you at an upcoming event. Cheers.